Hi everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the ABCFC podcast and another edition of the good old Bundesliga and A-League match week weekly review. Call it what you will. Um, we've had some crazy games in the Bundesliga this week. I can definitely say that. The amount of goals that were scored in stoppage time across the games this week. Not so many crazy games in the A-League. It was quite a flat week. I think there was only 9 goals, I believe, scored across all 6 games this week in the A-League. So it wasn't really a week that was flushed with goal scorers and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it was still a good week. Had the Sydney derby, of course. Melbourne Victory had their game, which I'm not going to spoil anything about yet. We'll get into that later. But yeah, good week for you, Ben, in terms of the football.
It was a yes and no. Some better results.
Yeah, when I say good
So
week for you, I'm mainly
yeah.
talking about the fact that West Brom came from 2 down to win 3-2, so it's completely irrelevant to what we're going to talk about for this video
Well,
today.
I didn't actually see that. That was against Swansea, right?
Yeah,
I saw they were a couple down and didn't even think anything of that result. And until you actually mentioned it, didn't even know that happened. So thank you for letting me know that the results I was was aside from that result was happy with. Yeah, there was some good results in both competitions, and look, really, it was a round of chaos, really, in terms of the Bundesliga. Some amazing finishes that we've just been talking about off air, but um, a better result without getting anything from it from my Hamburg crew, and we'll talk about that game as we go along. You're probably more sort of happy with that result than I am, but still plenty to like. But in terms of domestically, one okay result and one fantastic result for different reasons for me. So let's get stuck into it.
yeah, let's just dive straight in with the Bundesliga like we always do. And it's a perfect way to start with a Friday night game that absolutely flattered to deceive. I'm just going to say, you did the coverage of this one. I watched the 3 minute highlights for this one, and I think in the
Mm.
3 minute highlight package, it only showed 4 incidents in the entire match. They
Yeah,
had to some, they were struggling basically to get, they were basically struggling to get footage out of a 3 minute highlight package. The game was that dull.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's that
It's
much to
pretty
talk
bad
about.
when you've got yeah. I was just going to say, you've got a really dull game when you can only struggling to condense it into a few minutes. I mean, I've watched all of the games in that sort of condensed package, and some of them were fantastic in just 3 minutes. So, but Leo, I had a look at this one on Saturday morning over here, but Gladbach with 5 wins on the run, but it was their biggest test in Leipzig, coming to their home ground. But Tim Kleindienst actually came back on the bench after making a short cameo the previous week. So with him coming back, I think that's only going to make them stronger. They do have some power in the Pokal next week, I think on
Yeah, in
Wednesday
a few
morning.
days.
So that's gonna be a really good test for them too. But Tabakovic playing so well, having Kleindienst as that spare that you can bring off the bench, and Machino as well, who's already causing problems. We've talked about that impact that bench players can have in this competition over the last few weeks as well, and that's another addition. But um, the VAR had more work to do, and we've also become used to that in recent weeks. Gladbach were originally awarded a penalty. Shuto Machino was fouled, but this was actually waved off by the referee. It took them quite a while to actually get to the bottom of this review, which isn't uncommon in any sort of league with VAR.
We'll
Some of
get
those
into
decisions
VAR
are
a lot later.
quick. We will get into that. I
That's
won't sort
coming.
of do it. I won't
I've got
steal your
my
thunder
thoughts
on
on
that,
that,
but
people, and it's
um,
coming, but later in this video. So
yeah,
just,
but
yeah.
speaking of the speaking plenty to talk about just on the VAR, because Honorat was actually through on goal and was actually ruled offside just after the restart. So there's another one. Look, a rare goalless draw in the ABCFC era, but I think Gladbach would be pretty pleased with the point against a likely Champions League contender. We talked about that cup tie against St. Pauli coming up in a couple of days, but RB were outplayed in this one, but they held on defensively and had a bit of luck on their side.
Yeah,
What
I
did you
mean, from
make
the
of this one,
3 minute
Chester?
highlights that I saw Harder had a shot which was quite comfortably saved for Leipzig. I saw they Oh yeah, right at the end, David Raum hit the stanchion basically between the post and the crossbar. It almost looked like, which could have been another late goal in a week of late goals. Yeah, the offside goal for Honorar, the penalty, which was correctly waved away. As I said, we'll get onto some incorrect VAR decisions later on when we go through the A-League stuff. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's my thoughts on that game because even though, like, when I'm
Mm,
watching a 3 minute highlights, because you've done the main, like, coverage through the 10 minutes or so for this one,
yeah.
there's still so little to talk about this game. There was literally nothing that really
Yeah.
happened of
I
any
think
sort
we've
of note. Like both
yeah.
teams basically cancelled each other out. Mostly, it kind of felt
Mm,
like, at least from a 3 minute highlight perspective.
yeah. I mean
Yeah,
the last yeah, I was just gonna say that probably the full stop on this one for me was look, it was a really good result, I guess, for Gladbach, given the fact that they've had this really good run of form against probably sides that they definitely should be beating and others that they probably weren't expected to. So I guess while they'll probably find themselves unlucky not to win this one as well, I think they'd be pretty pleased with the result.
yeah. I'd say Gladbach definitely going to be happy with the point of Leipzig, considering Leipzig need to keep pace with the teams up in the top four. They're still second, but Dortmund
Mm,
are now just a point behind them, and Bayern have opened up an 8
yeah,
point gap as well between them
yeah.
and Leipzig. So yeah, speaking of Bayern, because there's really not much else we can say about that first game. Speaking of Bayern, let's just get right onto it. For the first time this season, and obviously for the first time since doing this podcast, because Sydney and City haven't played each other yet in the A-League, and we're not going to until about April if the last season's anything to go by. Our two teams in the Bundesliga faced off, and I have to tell you from my perspective, firstly, huge credit for you guys. You back on the back of 8 consecutive defeats. Yes, obviously you lost, and it's now 9 in a row, but on the back of
Mm,
8 in a row, and the recent defensive performances. Union game maybe recently aside, because I thought you were all right in that, although weren't particularly good in any other aspects in terms of going forward or anything like that.
no,
I kind of
yeah,
thought that, looking at those, and I put that down more to Union not being the most free flowing attacking team themselves, just more like a physical team. But anyway, so I
mm,
look back at the other games where you've had against teams like Hoffenheim, Gladbach, teams who are starting to find their feet in their attack. And I thought, oh well, we're just going to wipe the floor. We just put 6 past Freiburg, and they comfortably beat you. So like,
mm,
we're just going to wipe the floor. It should be done easy, easy, easy. And then something happened again, which is starting to worry me a bit as a Bayern fan, because it's the fourth game in a row in all competitions. I think now that we've conceded the opening goal,
mm,
which is something which is a little concerning. Just a
yeah,
sloppy defending from Bayern and from Lima, and give credit where credit's due. And maybe Neuer could have done a bit better, but Kutonji did still take the finish well. And then,
oh, it was a
yeah,
great finish,
you
yeah,
guys are 1-0 up, and I'm looking at it going like, hang on, what the hell? Like, but then I'm still kind of thinking, oh, fine, whatever. Freiburg went 2 up against us, and we storm back into this one. This is, a really a Pauli team who aren't in any good form right now whatsoever.
no,
So I thought,
yeah,
oh, we're just gonna, get control of the ball, knock it around a bit, get 1 and 2 maybe in the first half, and go and win this maybe 4-5, or even get another 6
mm,
again. I'm not being
yeah,
cocky, people. It's just the way I see it.
mm.
Um,
No,
realizing how cocky that sounds,
yeah.
like, oh, I just expected us to put 6 past you.
Hey, I think I said to you last week. What did I say in my summation last week? I expect many buses to be parked,
Yeah.
and that's sort of
But
what I
this is what I'm going
expected.
to
But
get onto
yeah,
now. Is this is the first
mm,
time this season? Because even when you had your little kind of, sort of semi-decent starts of the season, or for your club standards, decent. I'm not going to downplay it. Your decent starts of the season, you were still looking a little more vulnerable defensively than you did last season. This was the first time this
mm,
season that I genuinely saw you guys put up a defensive performance which mirrored that of last season, which what kept you comfortably safe. Because
I'd agree.
we were dominating as you'd expect when you were 1-0 up, but you weren't making it easy for us to, let alone break through or even create chances. Like Harry Kane
No,
was kept completely out of the game. Like, Carol Metz is a huge plus to be back for you. He's been decent-ish in recent weeks. I thought he was one of your best players on the park today. I haven't heard much about
agreed.
this other guy. I mean, you'd know more about him than me, but Ritzka or whatever his name
Yeah.
is. I thought he was another
No,
standout
yeah,
performance in your
Lars Ritzka.
defence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He was. I had a look at the lineup, and in fact, I'll bring up the deck because this is actually probably strategically and sort of from a formation point of view, a really good discussion
I
to
mean, it's the formation you go
to
with every
have.
week. It's just this
Yeah.
time your players kind of got it together. I will say, I think Jackson Irvine being fully back and fit is a huge bonus for
Mm,
you. He makes such a
yeah,
difference to the
absolutely.
organisation in your team in terms of the
Yeah,
leadership aspect and stuff like that. It was
definitely. I'm just
definitely a
having
bit
a
lost on Eric Smith in the beginning
yeah,
of the season when Irvine was out of the team.
yeah,
Obviously, we're
and
speaking of injuries. The one downside to
mm,
this break performance is Hutonji did end up going off injured.
yeah.
I don't know. You're obviously a Powley fan. I'm not. I don't know if your club's had any news on what that injury looks like, if he's going to be out for a long time or not. But
Yeah, it took me a while to actually realise he was off the park after the joy of him scoring that goal. I was more concerned about when are we going to give this goal up. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and look to sort of just sort of backtrack to Ritzke. Yeah, he's looking at the formation. He's Saliakis is probably the guy that took that sort of main spot. Him was Zagala, sorry. So he stood up, but yeah, Metz was superb. And even sort of leading into that first goal, normally it's the sort of play that most sides would be able to defend, but the back heel
oh
uh,
yeah, we're going to
was
Lewis
superb. If we're
Diaz.
going to talk
I say
about
this
that
every
now,
week.
yeah,
I'm a United fan, obviously, as I say every week, and people will well and truly know by now. Especially my friends who do the majority of the watching on this channel. Thank you guys. Um, I cannot believe Liverpool let him go, and I love the fact that he's at a club I support now. And that, like that goal against Union a few weeks ago, but that back heel assist was just ridiculous. It was a great finish from Guerrero, but it was the effort that we had to put in to take it into the break at one apiece that kind of summed up that performance of yours, and then that just continued in the second half. Like it just looked like we were just really struggling to break through. The biggest criticism I have to show people that I'm fair about my team is I was quite disappointed in the second half, particularly. Now, in the predictable nature of which we were starting to come at your defence, getting the ball to Elise, trying to get him to work his magic, you were packing the defence tight, you were playing well, and it just looked like for most of the game we just weren't really playing any sort of risky pass to try and create an
yeah,
opening, with the exception of that Diaz assist and a couple of other passes here and there throughout the match. It just wasn't
yeah,
really
yeah.
happening for us. Like trying to break through was just becoming a bit turgid, and I was getting a
Mm,
little frustrated because when I was watching you getting pushed further and further back. Because like
mhm.
first half you still tried to get forward even after even after you sat back after taking the lead. Second half the attacks were a couple here and there on the counter attack.
Mm.
Fujita played the ball through the middle once, I mean, but other than that, you were just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I thought, well, like we have to break through now. We've got to start being a little more risky instead of trying to play safe passes through a
Yeah.
compact defence. And in the end, it took a
Mhm.
wonderful cross from Kimmich for Diaz to head in, and then the 3-1 kind of flatters us. It puts a bit of a gloss on a scoreline which probably shouldn't have been 3-1. 2-1 would be a more fair result. And
I agree.
a
Yeah.
bit lucky from Jackson to get played onside in that situation. Just a bit unlucky, I guess, from Sands. I think it was, wasn't it? Who ended up getting the
Yeah,
touch.
I think it was Smith
Oh,
actually
Smith.
from
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
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 just
but
to play him on side and just comfortable finish. But yeah, from
yeah,
your point, that's my
unlucky.
point of view. It's a
Yeah.
big win for us,
Mm.
and still it puts us 8 points clear at the top now due to other results. You guys, as brave as the performance was, we can't hide the fact that it is now 9 consecutive defeats in the Bundesliga this season,
Mm.
and it doesn't improve your situation with 3 big games to come before that winter break. But on this game alone, how did you view your performance? Because I said it was good. On your team's perspective as a fan of St. Pauli, how
Yeah.
did you kind of view it?
Look, I think it's probably the best out of the nine defeats. This is clearly for me the best performance overall out of all of them. Really, I mean, yes, Union was it was good defensively. It looked like there was some life, but just couldn't get any sort of attacking run. And I mean, second half aside, well, we didn't really create too many chances for obvious reasons. I was actually impressed, despite not getting the result, but I knew coming in that we probably wouldn't. Did I expect us to sort of have the scoreboard flatter you guys? Um, Probably not. I thought it was going to be you guys sort of attacking first, similar to that Freiburg. game once we did go in front. But I said to you during the week, as soon as you guys score, I'm going to bed. It was 1:30 in the morning. Like quarter past 2 a.m. Sunday morning by the time half time came along. But look, to see that first goal that you guys scored, I wasn't surprised at all. It was a fantastic move. The second goal was class, as you'd expect from you guys. But the fact that we went and played five at the back instead of the usual three at the back in previous weeks,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
your wing
had
backs
to be
did sit a little deeper,
yeah,
didn't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, had to be done. But look, I'm glad we did because you can't. I think if we had played three at the back, you guys would have put six past us.
Like, what I will say
And
is the
yeah,
mid. You know, I talked up the defense and stuff. That kind of, I thought Sands is another one I want to talk about. Like, I really didn't know much about him
mm,
as well. Obviously, you do being a Howley fan. I thought James
yeah,
Sands had a really solid game, kind of like trying to
mm,
dictate the tempo as best he could in the middle of a
yeah,
park where he wasn't trying to wasn't going to be able to get on the ball much throughout the match.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's been good. I mean, he missed most of the second half of last year. I think he had a knee or a broken leg issue last season, and that probably didn't help with our scramble to survive last year. But yeah, his American international has been really good. Um, Chima Fujita was good. Pereira Large never stops trying to attack. I think he was sort of talked up in the commentary.
Yeah,
Um,
he was.
but
He was.
yeah,
I
but
thought he had some, decent moments ish.
yeah,
Less so in the second half. Definitely in the first half, he had a fair bit, but kind of
yeah,
faded as the game
um,
went on. But yeah,
yeah. I guess the 2 points that I probably took out of it was Jackson Irvine coming back. It's like he never sort of left. He's just sort of commanding that sort of midfield and really bringing those other guys into the game. But the main thing for me now is with the nine defeats in a row, and we talked about this just before, is other results. There were some other results that we'll talk about shortly that have
yeah,
affected
you
this
are now
team.
17th.
And yeah, um, and it doesn't. While the draw, the fixtures probably look a little bit easier, they're not.
Well,
Um,
that's before we've spoken
yeah,
a lot about this game, and we'll get onto the other games now. The one other thing to bring up is, I mean, it's a better performance. It was decent-ish against Union, so there've been back-to-back performances in the league where it's looked a
mm,
little better. I know you got a cup game to distract yourself from it, sort of midweek, but the main focus is those last three games before the break. In the position
mm,
you're in now, and knowing you could still continue to lose games, is it smart enough? Well, and you're like, obviously you're not your board, but in your opinion as a fan, do you think the best decision now is to wait until the winter break to make a movement and a decision on whether Blessing stays at the club or not?
I'm yes and no. I say no because looking at the upcoming fixture, so there's Kern away, which is winnable if we bring that sort of style. The massive one after that is a home game against Heidenheim, who we'll talk about their game shortly, which was probably the game of the round for mine. Um, that's going to be tough now, and nothing less than a 90-minute
Yeah,
effort is going to do. But then it's Mainz away, days before Christmas and the last game before the break. I probably couldn't ask for three better tests to get points from before the break. And I talked last week about the Bochum beating us just before the winter break. This has got all the hallmarks of banana
yeah,
skin
but your
games
point
or
is kind of
Gregor.
invalid because Bochum went down in last place
No, no, I know,
regardless.
but we were in really good form prior to that, and it was a game I didn't see us losing, and we did, albeit it was in a
Yeah,
blizzard and really poor conditions. But so yeah, let's quickly unpack this. So Kern, Heidenheim, and Mainz. Mainz and Heidenheim are absolute six pointers. Kern, well, they probably all are really. I mean,
yeah.
Kern
Look,
aren't
I
in the
think you
best
could
form,
kind of
but
look. I think you could kind of like, even if you were to go 10 in a row and lose at Cologne, if you put in a brave enough performance, considering how tight the points are right now, and we're
yeah,
closing in on that winter break. Look, we're not going to bang on about this game a lot longer. We have to move on,
no,
obviously, but we'll just quickly wrap this game up and saying, look, I think you could possibly get away with a brave performance like this game in a
a
losing
draw
cause, or
perhaps.
even like a
Yeah,
draw, definitely. But I even think you could
mm,
probably get away with a losing cause as long as it's a brave performance and not going down really limply against Köln. The big games to focus on are obviously the Heidenheim game and the Mainz game right now, and the
yeah,
cup game. If we're not talking about the Pokal in this,
no.
obviously, but
So yeah, to answer your question, I think if the Köln result is okay, but the Heidenheim result is not, that's when you
One
pull the
game, you
trigger. I
think?
think
One
that's yeah.
game before the break, or just wait until the break?
Knowing the board, I'd say wait until the break, but it's a funny game, football, so things might change depending on results. Um, he- he's probably saved himself with the result on the weekend, and if we get a decent
In
one at
terms of the
Köln, then we'll see.
performance, yeah. But I think now
Yeah,
you're bored. Sure, I mean, I don't know what you're bored, but we are going to wrap this up, people. We are going to move on
yeah,
very quickly. I'll put one more thing out there.
yeah,
I just think that you know, good, brave performance against Union, very good performance in a losing cause against us. If it just kind of goes a bit pear shaped at Köln or against Köln, um, will they just react quickly, knowing that there's two big games that you then have to pick up points in, and just say get someone in interim, even just to try and get
yeah,
something from these games, because
yeah.
10 in a row never looks good? Or is it just
No,
like, oh, you know what? Whatever the results are in the next three games, we'll make a decision at the break, and then not kind of disrupt the flow and give ourselves time to find a proper manager rather than go interim.
yeah,
I don't
that's a
know.
good
It's a
point
huge
too.
mess with
Yeah,
this stuff at the moment. All we know is facts of
mm,
facts. You have lost nine in a row, and it is, now a concerning factor that you now are entrenched in those automatic relegation spots now. So yeah,
mm,
but we will move on now. Finally,
yeah.
to a game which,
Sorry,
again,
folks.
similar to the Friday night game, had a lot less to talk about. Bremen doing what they do best and just solid defensively. And Köln, they're starting to normalise, I think, is the best way to put it this season. Kind of find their feet in a position you'd expect them to be more in, rather than how they started the season when they were right up there in the European places. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously you did the main coverage for this from the highlights I watched. The main
Mhm.
talking points was like, Marco Friedel, once again trying to make an impact on the game. But it was offside, of course. Jens Stay
Mm,
was the player who was ruled offside.
yeah,
More from a Köln perspective, I thought this is where, like, one of those stoppage time goals of the many there were this season. He got a Germany call up, obviously, in the last international, but he didn't really do much, I don't think, for Germany. But the youngster Saidal Mala
Mala,
making
yeah,
the impact late on to rescue a point for his side. It's not a bad point
hmm
for Köln. I think Bremen might be the slightly happier of the sides. I think Köln look at this going like, maybe, or maybe both sides will be happy with a point, really. As I said, Köln are starting to kind of level out, as I said, normalise themselves a bit in terms
Sugar
of
hit
this
sort of
sort of like,
stopped it. Yeah,
yeah. What were
yeah,
your thoughts on it? Obviously, you did this in far more greater detail than me.
yeah, and I'll try and keep this one a bit shorter than
Yeah.
the last one. Look, for me, I thought Bremen were actually quite good, and looking at the goal from Almala, it was a really good run, and it was a deflection that actually took it home, and that was probably unlucky for Bremen. I mean, yeah, we talked about Friedel's goal from a Stag cross. Was only 22 minutes in, and Lucas Kwasniok went nuts on the bench. Following that, it was a really easy finish and probably one that could have been avoided. But Stargo was ruled offside from a set piece, you know, after the break, and Bremen clearly had the momentum. And again, they'd be disappointed to concede so late with Almala, who's been in really good goal scoring form of late. But a deflection to sort of drive it home, yeah, they'd be really disappointed. But probably a fair result for both sides. Kern, yeah, they've sort of stagnated a little bit, as you said. That sugar hit from early in the year is
It's not
probably
it's not a bad thing. Like, no one was
no,
expecting them to go up and just go straight towards the top seven or five or whatever. Like, them stagnating and ending up finishing comfortably in and around mid-table, still a solid season for them, having just come back
mm,
up. So, you
yeah,
know, from an outside opinion of a non-Cologne fan like myself, I don't think, and I assume most of the fans wouldn't be too worried about this kind of run that they've been on, where they're starting to level out a bit, because, you know, it's the nature of the top flight football when you've just come up from the second division. Even if you have a good start, eventually there will come a period, you imagine, when this sort of stuff happens. So as long as they're not going on
we had
like
it last season.
runs
Yeah,
where they're
exactly. Yeah,
as long as they're not going on runs where they're losing 6, 7 games in a row. Sorry, Ben.
9.
Yeah. I was going to say
That's
nine
fine.
games in a row, but I didn't want to make it that obvious.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that, mate. Thank you
but
for
as long
that.
as they're not going on runs like that, it's nothing really to be concerned about. So yeah, again, yeah, like the Friday night game, there wasn't too much going on in this game. kind of the case with a lot of Bremen games right now. They're quite good at keeping games tight and keeping themselves within chances to win, but they're not always getting over the line. But again, yeah, not really a disappointing result for either side, given the grand scheme of things, really.
It was, and look, I think where the weekend sort of started to take a bit of shape was actually the next game
Yeah, which we'll move on
that
to
I did
now.
have a look at. So we'll move on to that one because this was up to an absolute ripper. I said to you before we came on here, I thought this was probably the game of the round, and definitely one of them. Um,
Not the
so
Friday night game between Gladbach and
oh,
Leipzig. That was
night
a
and
hell of
day,
a game, there.
night and day compared to that one, mate. I tell you, where do we begin? So Union at home against Heidenheim, and look, I expected this to go one way, and it was Union comfortably winning this one. But we all know by now that the Bundesliga doesn't always follow the script, and that was absolutely the case in this one. Neither side really tested the other. There were some worthy chances early. Rani Kadira scored his second in as many games. It was a really poor clearance, falling to his feet on the stroke of half time. Heidenheim sort of didn't threaten too much at their end. Uh, they barely threatened, but the home side made the most of their chances. So 1-0 going into the break, and it was only Union who probably thought they would continue on from that and win comfortably. Really, neither side threatened majorly, but Union did continue to press. But Heidenheim, on the other hand, sort of pressed a bit heavier. 85 minutes were gone. It sort of looked like they'd walk away with nothing again. But enter Stefan Schimmer, sorry,
David
not David
Schwimmer.
Schwimmer. Stefan Schimmer, he put his side level, and this has got to be one of the goals of the season for mine. You've probably seen it too. It was a brilliant touch off a low ball in from
I
Omo
wouldn't say
Traore.
I wouldn't say goal of the season. That's a little
One of them.
ridiculous.
One of
Oh, you mean
them.
for Heidenheimer? I
Yes.
just read your
They haven't
notes. I
scored
just
10
literally
minutes,
read your
yeah.
notes.
They haven't scored 10, but this was superb. Low ball in, and we talk about goals that you could probably try 10 times and not get the same result. This is probably one of them. It was a superb finish. It's probably the best Heidenheim goal I've seen all season.
God, that's low.
Well, it sparked them into Mission Impossible mode because a late winner in stoppage time is what followed. And look, this probably sums up the plight of Union in recent weeks. Yes, they took points away from Bayern at home, but all they had to do
You're not going to mention the
with this
fact that they
last...
beat you last week. I see how it is.
No, I'm
They
not.
took points off us,
No,
but you're going to skip over the fact that they beat you last week. Yeah.
mate, we've had 8 other games where you haven't won. I think I can skip
Yeah,
over
fair
that,
enough.
right? So all Union had to do with basically seconds remaining is clear a corner. They didn't, and Jan Schopner had other ideas as to how this was going to finish and headed home in front of the travelling fans. Scenes of delight from the Heidenheim bench. I think they all went to the away end, cleared the bench. Look, I'm actually happy for them despite
I
putting
just
my
saw
loss
that at the bottom as well.
into
No.
the bottom two. Look, they've had to really battle this season, and I say that with the caveat. I'm happy for them
Until
if
you
they
beat
don't
them,
take
until
points away from
yeah,
us.
exactly that.
Yeah,
As
in a
long
couple
as
of weeks.
go play them and thump them like 5-0 or something, yeah.
Or just beat
Just
them.
beat
Let's
them,
just
yeah, just win, yeah.
not make it too complicated. Let's just beat them. So yeah, but look, a result that I saw on the app that I used for my scores, and I didn't believe it, but to see how it finished was just insane, really. What did you make of this one before
I
we wrap
mean,
it up?
yeah, this was a pretty good game. I can't lie there. My biggest takeaway from this is Union Berlin have lost a match at home, and they've lost against Heidenheim as well. No disrespect to Heidenheim, I thought they've done. I've said many times in like a few weeks that I think I've been impressed with how they've gone about a game, but not quite getting over the line, and they did it this time. They managed to do basically what you guys couldn't do last week in the sense that they fell prey to a goal from Rani Kadira, and then they turned it around to take all 3 points. That wasn't a dig at you. That was just a coincidence.
No, of
Yeah.
course. No, not at all.
But
Not
yeah,
at all.
I thought Union, after they took the lead, I kind of just thought this is a game where they're going to let that physical nature of their team just show, and they're going to bully
Take
Heidenheim into
over.
submission.
Mm.
Fine, they're probably not going to score a lot of goals, but I think they're going to win it comfortably. Heidenheim won't get much of a sniff, but completely
No.
opposite. And I think the best thing for them is it's been a few times, like he's scored a couple of goals now in the last few weeks since breaking his duck this season, Stefan Schimmer. And I think it's so good for their sake that they potentially might have a goal scorer up front in him, and it could be crucial getting them even towards the playoff, where of course they stayed up through last year. They would they take that again? I mean, I'm not a Heidenheim fan, but I'm assuming they would, knowing they've done it before. Obviously, they would
Yeah.
take proper survival, but I've even giving themselves a chance, and I think this is a performance which shows it's not over for them. And for the last few weeks, after getting pumped off by Leverkusen and other teams beating them quite comfortably, thinking maybe it's just done for them. All it takes
Yeah.
is 1 week in football for opinions to change, and this is clear proof of that. That game
Yeah.
against you in
Yeah.
a few weeks' time is absolutely massive for both sides now. Now that Heidenheim
Mm.
is showing they can dig in and win games that, go against them essentially at the beginning. And yeah, the late goal was crazy. Like, poor defending.
Yeah.
I said, that
Superb.
it's completely surprised me. Of all teams to concede that kind of late on in a crucial moment of a
Mm.
game, and that easily from a corner. Union are one of the last teams in the league I'd put down to defend a corner so poorly, especially at
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
late stage of a game, and it just
Yeah.
happened. Heidenheim are up on their feet, and deservedly so, because that was one hell of a win and a performance from them
Yeah.
in the second
Yeah.
half, late on, to get
Yeah.
back in and to take all 3
They were
points.
brilliant.
You felt it with
Yeah.
you felt it with the players when they ran off to celebrate Schupner's winner. Like,
Yeah.
it's like the players have belief, and that's what it takes really to just try
Shackles have
and
been
push up.
released.
And
Exactly.
it happened with Gladbach
Yeah.
when they got off the mark against you. Heidenheim
Mm.
could go on a run now, get a win or two now, but between now and the winter break, and all of a sudden the second half of the season is looking a lot better for them. So yeah, but it can
Mm.
change in a week, football, as everyone knows.
It definitely can. But
Speaking
look,
of,
as a
look, I'm
yeah.
just going to say, speaking of
Mm.
changing in a week, we'll get on to the
Mm.
next game, because last week we were praising Augsburg getting that much deserved win, not deserved, needed win as well, and things looking up. Back down to earth in this game. I tell you what, Hoffenheim are fucking phenomenal when they're on it right now. I cannot believe, like, they are genuinely one of my favourite teams to watch outside of Bayern, obviously. Like, they are so good when they are just
Yeah.
on it, and this game they were on
Mm.
it from start to finish. Augsburg were absolutely destroyed. It could have been more than three. It's the second half. Nothing really happened in the second half because they were 3-0 up at half time and just kind of took it easy, I guess, in the second half, or easier. Yeah, they just weren't at the races, Augsburg, and that is all part of Hoffenheim, down to Hoffenheim and how good they were. That we talked about it before. That attacking third of Hoffenheim in this game, it was Lempele, Aslani, and Toure. Toure scored, of course, after some brilliant. I'm going to say it looks like bad defending from a Augsburg point of view, but then you watch it back on a different angle. The way Lempele actually makes the guy hold him off to allow Toure just to kind of run in behind to get that free shot on goal is pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's just a kind of showcase of how this turnaround that they've had since we began our channel. I know they drew last week, but it hasn't taken more than a week for them to rediscover how to win again.
Oh, they bounced back superbly
Yeah,
after that
like
little blip, and we've been singing their praises for the last few weeks, as regular viewers will know. So I was pretty happy to see them back on the winners list for sure. And you're right. I mean, looking at the highlights that I did, it just didn't look like Augsburg sort of defended because they couldn't. I mean,
it's
Hoffenheim
the
absolutely.
press. Like
Yeah,
when
it's
it's,
the press. Yeah.
I've not seen, like, they press so well. Like
Mm.
I've seen it in so many games in recent weeks where they've just the defense of the opposition have just had the ball, and just like in this game, they're just trying to get out, and just the players just know those trigger moments, like when to press. It's just phenomenal stuff. Huge credit
Mm.
has to go to the board right now. And it looks like this right now. It could go horribly for them in the second half of the season, but right now, as things stand, the board has to have huge credit because they didn't have a good season, as you remember last season. They were one of the teams in the relegation battle up until towards the end of the season with you guys, obviously, and
Yeah.
you guys
Yeah.
actually got safe before them, I'd argue. Um,
I
and
think we
they
beat them
made the
twice last
decision,
year
yeah,
too. Yeah.
and they made the decision to stick with the manager, and it's paying
Mm.
absolute dividends, even after the poor
Yeah.
start to the season they had. Since we
Yeah.
began this channel, they have been on a run like no other, and now they
Mm.
find themselves unbelievably level on points with Bayer Leverkusen, and I'm in fifth place in the table, 3 games before the winter break. It is utterly
What a
ridiculous, this
turnaround.
turnaround
What
for
a
Hoffenheim.
turnaround.
Like, that's really
Yeah.
like all I can, if people want to know, you watch the goal, Toure scored the first goal, of course. Then they made it 2-0. Berger got the Berger, however you meant to pronounce it, gets the
There we
second
go.
goal, and then a bit of an unlucky slash comical own goal from Zessiger to make it 3-0. Zessiger or Zessiger, however you pronounce it, to make it 3-0. But yeah, it just Augsburg brought down to earth for a bump. Hoffenheim still absolutely flying, and as I said, they're level on points with Leverkusen now. I mean, what the hell is going on here, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, I was really impressed. Just to sort of put a final note on this one, but look, Augsburg slipping back towards the relegation picture, and I think that might be the case for some other teams, as well, if they don't start getting results before the break. We've talked about a couple of them already, but look, credit to Hoffenheim. They've got a really well drilled unit at the moment, and they look like it too. But there's going to be it's going to be interesting to see if they can continue this Champions League push, up to and after the break
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. Get themselves back in the Champions League like they were a few seasons ago, of course. Yeah. So speaking of Bayer Leverkusen, as I mentioned before, there was a big game this week. Obviously, two teams in amongst that top four conversation. Two of the traditionally bigger teams in the country faced off. Dortmund won it 2-1, and Leverkusen, just like they limply went down to us, maybe not in terms of scoreline, but I just thought it was another flat performance from them overall in a game against another team in and around them, one of the big teams in the traditionally big teams at the top of the table. Dortmund, you know, they've been a little inconsistent here and there, but largely I've been impressed with how good they've been defensively. And this was, I mean, Leverkusen had some early chances, but Dortmund are good at soaking up pressure, albeit Poku didn't look on it today. Hoffman didn't look on it like he has in recent weeks, and then to just soak up that early pressure, and then just before half-time, go and get themselves in front. Free kick gets whipped in. I'm trying to remember his name here. Anselmino, that's it. Grabs his first goal for the club, and the second half they kind of built on that and started getting themselves into the game. They could have gone 2-0 earlier in the second half, and Garassi managed to get his header past the keeper from point blank range. It wasn't the greatest header, I have to admit. But nevertheless, they still kind of just kept getting better and growing into the game, and then Adeyemi scores again for them. Good recovery, good kind of return from him since all that legal issue outside of football,
Yeah,
issue
it
and
was
stuff.
massive.
Yeah, getting
It
a
was
good
massive.
header from a fantastic cross by Fabio Silva, who might be one of the worst strikers in Premier League history that I've ever seen. From how bad he was with Wolves a few seasons ago, but yeah, great cross from him. Adeyemi gets on the end of it, and then apart from that late goal back from Kafane, which was a pretty kind of inconspicuous topo, which found its way into the bottom corner. Um, Bayer Leverkusen really didn't have much to go in this game, and I thought, against a team up there with them again, just like against us a few weeks back, just another poor performance. And if they're going to keep doing this season, they could be in a battle for Champions League because of what I just said in the previous game. Hoffenheim are right on their doorstep now. So yeah, they've slipped down to fourth. Dortmund jump ahead of them into third, and only a point behind Leipzig themselves now. So it's all getting a bit nip and tuck, a bit tight in and around that top four as we march onwards up at the top. But yeah, what did you think about the Dortmund Leverkusen game?
Look, I thought Karim Adeyemi was fantastic. He's had a really good campaign since we started this podcast. But Patrick Schick and Hoffman as well. So always thereabouts. Poku explosive again, as you said. Look, a really good win for Dortmund. It's pretty big for them actually. They're sort of trying to chase you guys as well as Leverkusen are, and it
As
sort of seems
Leipzig,
like
yeah,
that gap is
and
and
Hoffenheim
Leipzig
now supposedly. So yeah,
Mm. It sort of looks like with every week that gap is widening for you guys, thankfully, just a little bit, in some way or another. But yeah, look, a really really good result, and good for Dortmund to sort of keep in touch with yourselves, and for Leverkusen, they'll bounce back, I'm sure.
I mean, yeah, you'd expect. I mean, they seem to be really good at turning up and putting on a display against the teams lower in the table, but they have struggled against the teams that up there with them this season, which is what's kind of
Yeah,
concerning for them. On to the next game and talk about another team who, are trying to get up there and amongst the top four, but they just can't seem to manage it because the consistency is killing them right now. It is. Frankfurt took on a managerless Wolfsburg, who are under interim charge at the moment after Simonis was duly sacked the other day, after they'd only won 2 of their first 10 games. I think we could see it coming for a club of the size of Wolfsburg. They currently find themselves literally flittering around the relegation zone, although a much, much improved performance where it just looked for the first time since we even began this podcast, they had a performance where they looked confident and they looked like the better team on the pitch on the day. Frankfurt had the early exchanges. They dominated the ball, but they didn't really make many clear chances. You know, save them like Richard Doan, who once again doing as he does, causing problems from an out wide perspective, but just lacking the final pass or shot really consistency from Frankfurt. And Wolfsburg, started to grow in the game. It was mainly the first half was kind of Frankfurt, but as the second half began, the confidence that Wolfsburg started to grow into just took over the match. And they were really starting to ask questions. And, it was a shot from Eriksson, just stung the palms. Poor goalkeeping from Zetterer. But good save to recover it when Amora followed in. But then it wasn't much longer until they did make the breakthrough. It was a really good finish from Zenta, it was, who volleyed in from the angle. And the one concerning thing for Frankfurt, despite their position keeping it up in the European conversation this season, they've conceded the most goals right now in the league, which is really worrying for them. And that was another example. I thought there was a good cross, but just kind of leaving him free on the back post. It's poor defending, really, and it kind of shows why they're in that position in terms of how many they've conceded. They did manage to get themselves back into it rather fortuitously, though. Wolfsburg undid all their hard work towards the end of the game. Dennis Vavro, bit clumsy on Arthur Teat from a corner to give away a penalty. Clear penalty, nothing to argue about there. Again, we'll get onto VAR quite shortly. And Batshuayi gets his first goal of the season. Quite a powerful, impressive penalty. But yeah, it's another game that's gone by for Frankfurt with another disappointing result in terms of their top 4 push. For Wolfsburg, it is still 2 wins in 12, but it is a promising performance. Under new management, he's only interim, Daniel Bauer, whether or not they wait. And same with you guys, obviously, whether they go with him until the winter break or if they try and change it quickly, I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, it's still 2 wins in 12, but it's a performance that can put some confidence back in the fans potentially, because from my perspective, it did look like a more confident performance from Wolfsburg this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, what were your thoughts on that one?
Look, I think I'd probably echo a lot of what you said there. Frankfurt would be really disappointed not to take more from that, and probably not to take all 3 points. But for Wolfsburg, it probably says more about them, and that it was a much better effort. Under new management, I'm sure that's not the first time that we'll mention that particular phrase this season, especially if certain results keep going the way they are. But it does sort of possibly, mean it could be a possible bounce to happen before the winter break, and we've already seen that with different sides getting results in the last few weeks, and some who possibly can as well. We've already talked about Heidenheim, who did that over the weekend, and hopefully the same with my mob. But for Wolfsburg, coming in under the new interim manager Daniel Bauer, it's like you were saying, do they stick with him in the next few games, or
I'd say at least for the first few,
depending on results, give them an opportunity.
Yeah, I'd say at least until the winter break, because watching their performance in this game versus their performances under Simonis in recent weeks, I could just see a complete contrast in confidence. Like, they wanted to get on the ball, they looked like they could get on the ball, they were trying to play football. It looked a lot different to the recent weeks under the last few weeks under Simonis, where it was just kind of this turgid sort of hanging on approach to games, as opposed to trying to take the game to the opposition. So I'd expect them, or not expect, but I wouldn't be surprised if they at least hang on till the winter break, because it is a factor. Just wait until then they got more time to get a manager in, or if results improve that much, possibly giving him the job until the end of the season at least. Who knows, right?
Yeah, give him a chance to sort of show himself and prove himself. And For a guy who's coached the under-19 squad, it would be a really strong endorsement for him and his credentials if that was to happen. So we'll see what happens from them. Will they slip back into their old ways next week? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next game. You can go through this first, I think, because you did the main coverage for this one.
Yeah,
Your gleeful rivals Hamburg getting a fantastic win in my opinion against an informed Stuttgart, who I was very disappointed with that result for them. I thought, a team who've been very good recently. Maybe the European game obviously didn't help in terms of fitness, but yeah, what were your thoughts on it? Obviously, you did the main coverage for it.
I did, and look, I'm probably loath to give Hamburg too much credit for this win, but the way that they won it was superb and really sort of lowered Stuttgart's colours amazingly, because the way that they conceded this result was shocking really, and you've seen this as well, so we can probably dissect it a bit. But look, Hamburg in a weekend where we've seen some crazy results and endings, Hamburg had a 5-game winless streak. Was this where they were going to turn it around against the Stuttgart side and for the Champions League spots? We didn't have to wait too long to find out. Robert Glatzel is a household name in that Hamburg lineup.
No, we're glad to have him back, actually. Like his injury.
Yeah, couldn't have scripted that any better. Found a way in front of the Stuttgart defence to fire home. It was in the first quarter hour, so it was an otherwise uninspiring first 45, to be honest. And we talked about the highlights packages being condensed.
Yeah, it seems like most of the games this week in the Bundesliga, all the action happened in stoppage time, as you're about to get into, of course.
Yeah, that's right. But look, the Hamburg would have hoped to defend the lead better, but they actually gave it up before the hour mark to the worst opponent you want to give the goal to at the moment. Yeah. Javier Fernandez had a really good chance to parry the ball away, and instead he spilled it straight into the feet of Dennis Undav.
I still want to say, as poor as the goalkeeping was from Fernandez, what a fucking finish. Still, to slide in and put it right in the top corner that confidently is just... Yeah. This dude is so good right now. It's unbelievable. Yeah. The finishing.
Having the nous to be on that spot, to know that, hey, the keeper could possibly spill this straight to me. It's those teams that know, and those players that know they've got the IQ to take those chances when they arise, and it might only be one. This guy's got that in spades, and as soon as it fell to him, it was only going to be one outcome, and really disappointing from the home side after doing so well to take the lead in front of the home fans. But Undav knew straight away what to do, and he did. So, but there was more sort of drama to come, I suppose. So Rossing, Lalasit, I hope I got that right, folks. Saw a second yellow on 80 minutes, and it actually looked like that was it for Hamburg, and that Stuttgart would go on from there and draw level, but draw level, yeah. Like I said, it was a Kidses Fisher, and there's so much happening I can't even remember what I was up to. But the league actually threw up another crazy finish, and we're used to those by now. So let's unpack this in its own sort of.
So I'll first start by saying I've been talking up Angelo Stiller for weeks on end. People are probably getting fucking bored of hearing it now. Look, I'm not going to change my opinion on him. I still think he's a class midfielder, but my word, was that one of the worst free kicks I've ever seen. Like, at the end of the game, just to basically boot it straight into the wall, at the feet of the wall almost practically, and then take nothing away from the counter-attack from Hamburg, but it's like just a bad free kick from Stiller, and then they go on the break, and then like is the theme of this week in the Bundesliga, a last-minute goal, and stoppage time last-minute goal, gets played across, and then Fabio Vieira's just there to slot it home. Still a very good finish under that sort of pressure as well, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But the free kick sort of was this. This is probably got to be one of the best coast-to-coast finishes that I've seen. So led by Fabio Belda, but basically all the way down the left-hand side, and found his fellow Fabio, not Patrick Vieira. As I mentioned in my notes here, um, in space to fire home a winner that they really had no right to
You
score.
know what?
I thought.
They
I mean,
did both play for Arsenal, so you're fair enough on the Fabio
oh
not
right,
Patrick Vieira shout.
I didn't even know that. I just thought I was being clever with that little quip. But yeah, they, in my opinion, they had no right to score that winner, and it probably says more about uh, Stuttgart not defending and also not being aware to the counter attack than
Also, you
anything
being a
else.
Pauli fan not wanting Hamburg to win in that fashion.
A little bit of that, yeah. But anyway,
That part as well.
it's not about me,
Yeah.
mate. It's about the Hamburg fans who would have been thrilled with a great home win, but it really probably threw up more questions for the visitors than anything else. I mean, to concede, that's two teams we've already talked about in this wrap up that have conceded really poor goals um, in the dying seconds and dying minutes of games.
Yeah, exactly.
It was another one of those, and there's more questions for Union, and there's more questions for Stuttgart. I feel
Yeah, look, it's a great win for Hamburg. Great way for them to get back into winning form as they were starting to slide towards that unwanted
another
relegation
one of those
zone.
clubs. Yeah, yeah,
It's a good performance for them as well. The sending off a little bit disappointing, but they'll move on from that. From a Stuttgart from the perspective of Stuttgart, from what I saw, great finish from Mundav. I mean, he's one of the best strikers in the league right now in terms of the finishing quality. It was disappointing, obviously, for their point to lose Chris Furyk like they did to injury, but a good sign is he was playing midweek. He was excellent, I thought, in their European match midweek, and he was decent as well in this game. Having Jamie Lagerling back from his injury is going to be a massive boost for them going forward. He's obviously been a key figure for them for the last couple of seasons now, so they're going to be glad to have him back from injury, even if it means they've lost Chris Furyk instead. Obviously, they'll hope they're all going to be fit, of course. It's a bad way to lose a game for Stuttgart, and it hasn't helped their chances of getting up and towards the Champions League. But I've seen enough from them this season to think that they're probably going to bounce back from this, get themselves back in the winning form, and be right back on track by the time we hit the break in a few weeks. So yeah.
mm. Yeah. Well, I mean that just leaves one more
Yeah,
game
and what I
for the
covered,
Bundesliga wrap up. Yeah.
a game which a result has is and a game which is a result, which means you guys are not currently bottom of the table.
As
Yeah,
much as at times it looked
this
like we probably
game
should be,
was.
but yeah.
This game was. Yeah, I mean, the one thing to say this is just this game was just complete and utterly dominant from the home side, being
Yeah.
Freiburg. I know we've talking about like when we started this podcast and Mainz weren't in good form. We were basically saying things like, "Look, it's the European form. It's messing with them, but they'll get back." I'm now getting to a point where I'm seriously getting worried for Mainz. Every week that passes, and this is by far the worst performance I've seen from them since we started this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The European football, excuse or not as it may be, Freiburg also played midweek in Europe, and they ran out of resounding winners in this game regardless. So I don't know if we can put it on that or anything, but it just seems like this consistent run of form, bad form that Mainz are being on is really starting to take their confidence down as well. Because even when we began this podcast and they were losing games, they were still playing well. They were dreadful in this game, just dreadful. From the beginning of
Yeah.
the game to the end, they were completely second best.
Mm-hmm.
They conceded early after 5 minutes. Great finish from Lucas Hurler, who thought he had a much needed goal, only for that to be ruled offside. But it didn't really matter because that was really the tone being set because it wasn't. It was less than 10 minutes after, which a corner got flung in. We talked about bad goalkeeping time and time again over the weeks on this channel. Got to put this one in as well. I know the commentators were saying the defenders are more at fault. I don't really think so. Ball gets headed in. Lasse Riese is who was playing in goal after Zentner got rested. Um, just completely falls backwards towards his line and just loosely palms it out. And Freiburg just bundle the ball in for the easiest lead possible and just basically take off from there. Essentially, Mainz, they conceded after 5, it got called off. Then less than 10 minutes later, they were 1-0 down, and that was just the story of the game from that point on, basically. Later in the first half, Vincenzo Grifo scored to make a piece of his own history, apparently going level now as Freiburg's all-time leading Bundesliga goal scorer with that goal, so great moment for him.
Yeah.
And then it didn't really get any better for Mainz in the second half, as it kind of just went from bad to worse to saw another red card in as many weeks as you could imagine. Dominic Kor obviously getting sent off for a really reckless challenge last week. maybe not as reckless from Pal Nabel, but equally as careless. And yeah, straight red card. Like their luck is just not in with them. And then Manzambi scored against us, of course, last week. Gets a really good finish to make it 3-0, and they're down to 10 men, 3-0 down, heads are down, bottom of the league. It only gets worse. Osterhager comes off the bench to steal in at the back post to wrap it up. It was just an obliteration from Freiburg in every way. Mainz were just like I'd say one of the worst Mainz performances since we began this podcast. I could even throw in one of the worst team performances since we began this podcast. It was that bad in my opinion. Like usually when I'm going through these games and watching these extended highlights, at least I'm seeing chances from the opposition. Like when Leverkusen did, Heidenheim in 6-0, there was still the odd chance or breakaway forward. Nothing. Literally nothing of note for Mainz in these extended, maybe if I watched the full game, they might have had something, but like it was just utterly dreadful for Mainz, and this is what I'm saying. I think I'm going to stop making excuses now at this point, saying, the European football they'll get better. I don't see it anymore. I know I said a bit about Heidenheim last week, and they've gone and won this week, and now my opinion's all changed. And fair play, Mainz might get a massive win next week, and my opinion on them might change as well. But as things stand, I'm not looking at this Mainz team thinking they're going to fix it anymore. I'm looking at this Mainz team thinking they need to make how are they going to fix it rather than they're gonna. And I think it starts from me at the manager. Bo Henriksen is just not getting a tune at all out of this side right now. Week by week, the performances are looking worse. They're looking less energy. They're looking less confident. They're just, the way they used to link up to the strikers, even when we began this podcast and creating chances, that's fading in every week now. It's just not really a good time to be a Mainz fan. The bottom of the league, of course, right now, and it's not, for Freiburg, they bounced back after a harrowing defeat against us last week. Going at it early again, and this time getting themselves over the line in quite impressive form. Great performance from Freiburg. Absolutely an aberration of a performance from Mainz, though. Worst that I've seen since we began this podcast. I'm just going to say that right now from any team that was. So yeah, what were your thoughts on that absolute obliteration?
You've probably said a lot of what I was going to say anyway, so I'll keep this quick because we've got a few A-League games to sort of get through, and I know you've got some details to sort of go through in that competition. But look. The main thing for me is Mainz were awful. The bed poor in recent games since we started the podcast, but this was at another level. Bo Henriksen is steering the ship of a side that's got no confidence. They look beaten within the first 5 minutes. Yeah. There's other managers who are in the same boat as Mainz, but at least they've got glimmers of hope. My mob have got glimmers of hope, despite not winning games. But these guys, where's that resurgence and where's that lift going to come from? It's they've got problems, and it's like I've said with Heidenheim in recent games until the weekend. Where's it gonna start coming from? And the answer was on Saturday against Union. But they've got massive problems, and credit to Freiburg for just doing what they do, and they blew them away, really.
Yeah. So yeah, that will wrap up our Bundesliga portion of this. It's been a bit long today, folks. It's going to be a slightly longer episode as we approach the hour mark, because I have a fair bit to say on a certain game because of a certain bit of technology.
Put the kettle on or grab
because of a certain bit of technology that is being used in football for the last 5, 6, 7 years or so now. But before we move on to the A-League, I'll remember this now because it's in my head. If you've made it this far in the video, people, don't forget to give us a like, a follow, and subscribe, and on our Instagram, of course. Hope you're loving this content. We've got plenty more coming every week. Well, it's going to get a bit messy around the winter period, but we'll save that for another video. I'm not going to bore you with those details now. But yeah, so I hope you're liking this content. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. And yeah, onwards and upwards with the show. On to the A-League, of course. And you had the liberty of watching an absolute, just like in the Bundesliga, you had a very entertaining game, not on Friday night. There was a winner in this, but again, from the highlights of what I saw, there wasn't much more other than that goal from Sam Klein, was there?
Look,
Although I will say, you enjoyed it because as a City fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm going to challenge you very quickly on that because I did actually think it was quite a great game at the end of it. But look, probably the start of it and the finish of it were the best two parts of this game. So we started the weekend at what I'm calling Sriracha Suncorp, because the end of this game was just nuts. So a newly resurgent Brisbane, who've actually been in really good form. We both know how well they've been in recent weeks. Um, Looking to go unbeaten in the last 4 games, which we probably wouldn't have said about 6 weeks or so ago. Um, Against the Melbourne, and you can't call them victory as I've got in brackets here. So I cling to the bottom row of the grid as it was. A glory win on Sunday later in the round could actually have really big repercussions for Arthur Dillis' side. So we'll get to that later. But what I do want to call out is the Suncorp pitch. It was actually in really ordinary shape due to the recent Metallica gig at the ground, and we've both seen it. It was shocking. But Victory's defence was in what I'm calling Enter Sandman mode as they went down within the opening minutes. Yeah, Sam Klein, as
What
you
the
said.
hell does that mean? Like, how on earth? I'm sorry.
They were half
What on earth are you
asleep.
talking? Oh, okay, I get it. Okay, the fact that they were
Yeah,
half asleep.
come
Okay.
on, mate. The viewers are saying with me on this. I'm sure
You're
you
saying
can as well,
Brisbane are
but
walking around and going, "Say your prayers, little one. Don't forget my son."
yeah, and Melbourne City will be saying the same thing hopefully in a few weeks in the derby as well. But we're not here to talk about that game. We're here to talk about Friday night. So yeah, Sam Klein put Raw ahead in I think 3 minutes, first 3 minutes. Beat 4 opponents and just really defensively not good enough for victory. But what else is new? But look, the guy I want to call out here in that first half and probably beyond was Dean Bouzanis. He made some really good saves, but Raw were mostly comfortable and in control, I thought. But just to sort of put a full stop on this one, I'm not going to have too much on about this one because the main action, as I said, was the start and the finish. So let's talk about the finish. So there was a corner in stoppage time, and Dennis Jonro actually was straight red carded for kicking out his opponent in the far corner, even though he thought he was actually just trying to clear the ball. That wasn't what VAR saw, and we're going to talk about VAR
Yeah, we'll get to the VAR.
later. All I'll say is it looked like it was a kick to the plums, and it probably was from Sean Evans' point of view because he gave Genre a straight red card, and the ending of this actually saw almost an all-in brawl, which you don't really see in this competition too often. But that's exactly what happened. So I think the next fixture between those two sides at Amy in the new year will be unmissable. The only other thing I'll say about this was a really good month of football from the Raw. It's impressed both of us. I think we can both say that.
100%.
And it's putting victory within deserved reach of the foot of the table. What did you make of this one before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, not really much to say. I thought it was a fantastic finish from Sam Klein, I will say that. 100% deserved. And Brisbane are very good at doing this right now. They're not scoring a lot of goals in games, with that Jets game aside, obviously. But defensively, they're just looking like a rock at the back right now. And all credit has to go to the way Michael Van Panis has his team set up, because not only are they in second, they're deservedly in second place at the moment, which is one thing to say. Well, we're predicting them to finish 11th or whatever it was when we did that unreleased pre-season prediction video.
Right now, yeah.
So we're just completely wrong about that. But yeah, victory. I mean, we could both love this, obviously. City and Sydney, obviously. You got to love it. I mean, I know you said deserve reach of the foot of the table. That was obviously written after the Friday game. That has now been confirmed that they are now bottom of the table after results that we'll get onto in a bit. So they are now at the bottom of the table. It's not that new for them, obviously, because they have won the Wooden Spoon twice before, I might point out. So it's something they're well aware of doing. And maybe it's just really started terribly for them. And yeah, there's a lot of talk going on right now about whether Arthur Dillis is still going to be in charge by the time they start their next game this coming week. So
yeah. And the very last thing I'll say on this game before we move on is credit to Michael Valkanis. Really, he's done a fantastic job with a younger side and some really good talented kids. Harrington, Klein. Really,
and they're kind of all held together by the leadership of Jay O'Shea in that side as the much
he was the other guy I was going to mention.
As the much older experienced head in that side. He's just got a load of kids around him, and the way he's kind of just getting them through games is just top notch right now, in my opinion. And
sure is.
As I said, they're deservedly in second, in my opinion, really are.
Yeah.
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 but we'll move on now because we've got to speed up a bit, and there's a fair bit coming in our game. So we'll kind of apologies, people, but we will probably quickly touch on the next two games because one there was a little more action, the other one there was basically fuck all to talk about. Um, we'll start with the Wellington Adelaide one, which I was going to watch, but when I messaged you said busy, we swapped those around. Wellington 2, Adelaide 1. It's another good win at home for Wellington. Adelaide are great at home. They aren't so good on the road. From the
No.
highlights, what I'd say Wellington largely dominant from the game, really. Adelaide not having much. They missed a couple of, in the second half, I think it was, they missed a couple of glaring opportunities. Jovanovic is one I seem to remember sending wide from a position you'd expect him to at least get it on target for. Najarine, getting himself on the score sheet for his new club. Wellington very good at home, as I said. Adelaide crap on the road. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, what did you? Alex Rufer, obviously, the ever present, grabbing himself
And
a
that
one
was
away
a
goal.
superb. Yeah, it was a really good finish. The ball came in from the corner, and he was just Johnny on the spot. The Adelaide defence didn't see him sort of waltzing in at all, and he was able to sort of met his right boot perfectly. The first 15 minutes you can't ask for a better start, but Najarine with a penalty, Armiento went down, and Najarine made no mistake, his first goal for Phoenix after leaving City. But the guy I want to talk about is Yaya Dakuli. Um, whether you saw the dive or not, that I thought would have looked right at home in the Olympic Aquatic Centre, just overturned on VAR and rightly so. But Joey Garuccio, the cousin of Ben, got onto a really nice through ball and scored his first A-League goal to give Adelaide something. But Wellington hanging on and earning a really hard fought win was the real talking point of this one.
Yeah.
And that was probably what I'll sort of mention in this one. Just
Yeah,
quickly.
I mean, yeah, as I said, yeah, not really much more really to say about that. Solid performance from Wellington. Adelaide need to fix up their away form really, but they're still, because of the league being so tight as it is right now. I mean, we're still top, believe it or not, because of the way results have gone our way this weekend. It's not over for Adelaide at all, and Wellington are pulling themselves back up towards the top six, and they've got a massive game, obviously, at Mount Smart against Auckland with the second New Zealand derby of this season, which I'm going to say second. There's already been two New Zealand derbies, and we're only heading, and that's going to be week 7. It's a little ridiculous again, the fixturing, but I've been down this route with the fixturing before. I'm not going to bring up that one again. I'm not Cricket Australia. I don't dig up things from the past that much. We'll move on to that.
I was just going to say, let's sort of quickly touch on the next game.
Okay. I'll
Well.
paint the picture.
Yeah.
So your mob, Melbourne City, played Central Coast Mariners, and it was 0-0. Let's talk about the derby that happened later that night.
Let's pretty much. I mean, look, there's.
Sorry, people. It literally was that dull, even on the highlight. Like I said, with the Leipzig Gladbach game, similar vibes with this one.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, not a whole lot to sort of mention. I mean, Takeshi Kanamori had another really good chance, and he's been great for City the last few weeks. But Redmayne was tested. City looking to get points after an ACL win at home midweek, a rare home game for them, I should say, and we've already talked about why that is, so we won't sort of gloss on that too much. But City just happy to bounce back. Nor had a goal waved off the Mariners to frustrate their fans even more.
I'm just saying miles offside as well. That showed the guy of desperation. That kind of shows the desperation he was to grab a goal.
That's how offside it was,
He's standing a yard or two offside, and he scored, and he's celebrating.
He was on the other side of the road. That's how.
That shows you how desperate that man is for a goal. That he's going to celebrate when he knows he's about a yard or two offside.
Yeah. Absolutely. But look, not much,
for the review.
Yeah, not much to cover. I've already moved on to next week for my mob.
Look, I'll just say with the offside celebration, it wasn't quite as ridiculous as that one Karen Bullitt did all those seasons ago for Wanderers, if you remember that game. I think it was against you guys as well, wasn't it? When he scored when about 4 yards offside and then hurdled the advertising hoarding behind the goal and ran around in front of where the Wanderers fans were, with his arms up, celebrating, only to be pulled back a minute later after doing all that to be told he was offside. Yeah. But anyway, speaking of Wanderers, we'll get onto a game which, from a neutral perspective, I don't know if you watched this full game or not, but from a neutral perspective, even though it was only a 1-0 scoreline, what a derby that was. I mean, that's what you want from a derby. Tackles flying in, but not to the point where people are being stupid and reckless. Just pure aggression, basically, from both sides, especially Wanderers. Look, I have to give my credit. Look, it's annoying that we've lost. Our four-match winning run comes to an end. I'm not too annoyed in the grand scheme of things because, as it stands, we're still top anyway. But it would have been nice to win that game and open up a gap. But anyway, I have to give a huge amount of credit to how Wanderers went into this game. Probably buoyed by the confidence of beating Mariners last week and getting themselves off the mark this season with a win, with their first win. To come into this derby still with us firm favourites of the bag of 4 wins, and they just from the get-go they set that tone of aggression and that they weren't going to be dicks around, basically. Just really sort of aggressive, in-your-face play from that side just made it really difficult for our side to get a decent hold of the game, at least until the second half.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll gladly give you the floor on this one because I know you've got a bit
Yeah,
to
look, I'm
sort of
not.
unpack with
I'll
this one.
touch
So
on. I'll touch on in the essence of time. I'll touch on the actual game because I've got a fair bit to say about one particular moment in the game. But yeah, good start from Wanderers in terms of setting the tone early on. Even though it was goals at half time, I felt we really struggled to kind of get a foothold in that first half and kind of like we have in recent weeks, even though we haven't been scoring a lot of goals in the first half of games this season, we've been good at soaking up pressure, but it kind of felt like they were really getting close to scoring against us early on in that first half. Joey Pantazopoulos was phenomenal in that game. If I'm going to give credit to any Wanderers player, the pantomime villain as I've written here, pure man of the match performance stuff. I've got to be neutral here, even though I'm a Sydney fan, obviously. Just a proper display that you want from a defender in a derby or a player in general from a derby, just getting stuck in, winding the opposition out, had the tongue out on the, afterwards, wigging like around every time he was seen on camera on the pitch, trying to really get in the heads of the players. Um, Showed his attacking prowess late on with a free kick and a couple of late runs into the box. But
yeah,
he was also then in the second half subject to one of the worst, and I mean worst, VAR decisions in A-League history. Before I touch on that, they did score. They were 1-0 up at that point. His long throws as well were causing us chaos, and one of them was our undoing. Pantazopoulos' long throw into the box. Tisserand has usually been quite a steady foot this season, just kind of messed it up a bit. The clearance headed it down into the turf, and it fell straight at the feet of Alan Qualu. Just, from that position, like any striker would, just finishing quite comfortably past a helpless Devonish Mears and getting them the goal, which ended up being the only goal of the game. But yeah, on to the main talking point of this game. VAR, video assistant referees. This is a big talking point. I've said it many times. This hasn't been the first season. There's a huge issue in this league with how VAR is used, and it's because in big games it happens so often. In the biggest games, Sydney derbies, not so much Big Blues, but I've seen it happen in Big Blues in the past. I'm not 100% sure on Melbourne derbies, but I imagine here and there this stuff has happened like this as well. Whoever these people, like the people that they're hiring in these games to do VAR, especially in the big games, it's been going on for so many seasons now where they have to realise that they can't use it as a tool to create drama. It is a tool to help back up referees if needed. Not a tool to write your own fucking storylines and create drama when there isn't or shouldn't be any. As much as it's a derby and a big game, drama will naturally happen because of the nature of the game. It being a game, a derby, a big game. You don't need to use that technology of yours to add drama where there's already drama, right? The handball rule, as everyone knows, is hard and fast, loose, call it what you will. Like it's very interpretive. We all know that, right? But that still doesn't mean you can start misinterpreting what is still clear handballs by the rules of the game, right? His hand is not tucked into his side. It's not behind his back. It's not in a natural position. That has always been and should always be a handball. As opinionated as this rule is, that is one thing we cannot debate as fans. And I bet even Wanderers fans would back me up here and agree that they got away with one massively in this game for us not to win a penalty because of this. Ball gets fired in after we're pushing towards the end of the game. Fired back in. Pantazopoulos standing in the box. Look, he doesn't deliberately do it, but I mean, he's still got his hand out away from the body, which obviously, as the rules state, is an unnatural position. Strikes him flush on the hand, goes past, denies either a goal or well, it's a handball. Doesn't matter if it denies a goal. It's a handball in the box. It doesn't matter. It's a penalty. And not even for a minute, barely even 30 seconds, is that footage reviewed on VAR before they go upstairs, before they tell the referee, yeah, not a penalty. Don't give it. And then I remember watching it, like, it's just like, I think, like, it looked clear, and then they showed the replay afterwards, and then they were mentioning, the commentators were mentioning, even the Sydney FC fans at the ground, after upon seeing that replay, were absolutely in a chorus of boos, as you'd expect, because of how bad that decision was. This is the whole point of this rant, right? It's not just in this game. We've seen it happen in other games as well, especially big games in this league. VAR is a tool to help referees. If a referee can't make a decision because they don't have the best angle, or they happen too quickly, or for any reason like that, or it's too subtle, that's where VAR is used. It gets put on. Now, I'm not saying everyone uses it properly. The Premier League, for one, has used it awfully. Even the Bundesliga has had bad moments with it. But the the facts speak for itself. At least in the Premier League and the Bundesliga, far less do they use it to create drama as much as they do in this league. Right?
Yeah.
Use it as a tool to help the referee. If there is a clear and obvious handball in the box, don't decide, oh, you know what, it's a Sydney derby and it would be really dramatic if Wanderers were to hold on for a 1-0 here. So forget that. Let's just ignore the rules that have been in place with this game for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, back to whatever year it was when the ancient Chinese people first invented the game of football. Right? Forget all of that. A handball is it may be a handball, but we're going to find a reason to create more drama and say no, Sydney aren't getting a penalty here. And I'm not saying there's going to bias because of Sydney fan. If it was the other way around, I'd have the same rant. If we won the game 1-0 and Wanderers were denied a penalty for the same thing, my rant would be exactly the same, because this shit has to stop, Football Australia. Now, I know none of you are going to watch this video, and fair enough, right? But if anyone at Football Australia is watching, take this in note, and also don't forget to like, give us a follow, and subscribe. Look, the fact stands that I'm ranting for too long, and this video is going to reach 2 hours if I don't hurry it up here. But I'll finish it off with this, just saying, look, great performance from Wanderers, but VAR, learn how to use it properly. You guys are trained officials. You aren't dragging people off the street or out of the crowd to run it. Which, ironically, I reckon if you did drag someone off the street or out of the crowd, they would probably do a damn better job at running it anyway. So I don't even know what my point's about it. Like, it's just awful. Look, that's going to be the end of my rant. Just learn how to use VAR properly before we move on to the last 2 games of the week. Do you have any thoughts about the derby, Ben, or the worst VAR call in A-League history, or one of the worst? There's been so many of them.
What can I say? Just, that's a gold star rant right there, my friend. Just, summed it up beautifully. And I did see the sort of the moment in question. Yeah, the VAR in a competition that wants to be taken seriously above other and seen by other countries. You've got to get that sort of stuff right.
Yeah, look, I'm saying Premier League has some shocking VAR decisions itself, but they do it in any game. I'm not defending or saying that's good, but what I'm saying is they don't just pick and choose games. It feels like in this competition they'll do this shit when it's a big game because they're trying to create drama. Like, oh, people aren't watching the game. Oh, I know how we'll get them to watch. Of course they're watching the game. That's the biggest problem with football in this country. You overhype derbies and don't give enough care to smaller games. Don't put more hype on a derby. I'm still ranting. Look, we should move.
I was going to say, I didn't mean to sort of spark it back up there, but I think you've made some really good points there. And look, unlucky, but I think the next Sydney derby is going to be massive based on that result. But I guess that the next game didn't live up to that.
Look, the next game is what made me happier slightly about that, because it's a result that meant we stayed top this week. An unbelievable result after the run of form they've been in recently, and the fact that Auckland were unbeaten this season going into it, and especially for them to lose at home, which we all know from last season is not an easy feat to go beat them at home. Newcastle just turning up and just putting on a show, which has another talking point in another crazy game I watched this week. It began like any normal game. Well, not really, because Auckland trailed quite early at home, but Newcastle put it on them. Will Dobson, the youngster, getting one of all these new youngsters in this Jets team, getting himself his first A-League goal. And, but then Auckland fought back, Verstrate getting him 1-1. And then, the game started to level out. But then, Newcastle just showed a bit more resilience than they have in recent weeks. Whereas they've kind of crumbled with the inexperience of the young players in the team. They kind of got themselves back in, and it was Lockie Rose who got them back in, and they were 2-1 up at half time. But the most, in my opinion, memorable and interesting, not to say this game was boring, but part of this match was what happened from the 60th odd minute onwards, not with the players, but with the sky above them and the pitch conditions beneath their feet. Because I don't know how much of this you saw on the highlights, but my God, talk about a throwback to those games at Skill Park when players were basically wading through a swamp to try and play football. The heavens opened up and had an absolute torrential downpour in that second half in Auckland. And it's just the pitch got so bad. It was like there's literally moments. I said I don't know how much you've seen in the mini match or the highlights over you watched it.
I'll have to go back and watch.
It was just moments of like Newcastle trying to break and just like Auckland trying to break in certain parts of the pitch, and the ball would just get like they run over the ball because it's just stopped in the wet ground and the not wet, swampy ground. Like, it was getting to the point where it was bordering on dangerous, and it was around the 80th minute mark where Alireza Fagani did kind of bring the captains together and start to have discussions over a postponement or like a temporary leaving of the field to wait for conditions to get better. But at that point, they decided to press on and finish the game because the conditions were improving overhead. Good on him. I'm with that as well because it meant Newcastle held on to win the game and keep us top.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It
was the first half was a fairly normal half of football, albeit from Newcastle leading 2-1 away at Auckland. The second half was just ridiculous just because of the weather. It's what you watch football for, people. That sort of weird stuff happens from time to time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the two things I'll probably mention, and I didn't say a whole lot of this game, but I'm sort of curious to go back and watch the last sort of half an hour or so to see exactly what happened. But you've got conditions like that where the game might be called off, and you've got Friday night's game where the pitch was so bad, you think, how could they have not called it off?
Look, people, for those of you who watch this channel but aren't familiar with Australian football, not AFL, obviously like soccer football for those Americans out there, here's a perfect way to sum it up this week. I can't think of many other countries which Football League, in the same week of games, you could have one game play on a dust bowl and another play in a swamp. Yeah. Such is the bad pitch conditions in this league, right?
Pretty much. I mean, you've heard me talk about games at Marvel where AFL clubs have had to play when they've had concerts, and they usually come up pretty well. But this was just disgraceful. But certainly Mount Smart. The Warriors play in the NRL, week to week. So maybe they need to have a look at their drainage in the off season. I don't know.
Yeah.
But good on Fagani for pressing on and finishing the game. We've seen that in the Big Bash as well. There was a game that got called off on Friday night because of exactly the same thing in farcical circumstances. But we're not here to talk about that. But
look, to touch on the game,
you'd be happy.
To touch a little bit on the game before we move on to the last game of the week. Look, from a Newcastle perspective, I thought defensively they looked their best they've looked this season. Mark Natter and Will Merring were very good in that defence for them. They were just like Mark Natter was just positionally on it, and Will Merring was just up and down that line from fullback position all afternoon, basically just making Auckland really work for trying to get themselves something out of this game, which ultimately they didn't. Some great saves from James Delianov as well, I thought, as well, for Newcastle to help towards that. And the attack just looked on it again. Like, there were times in the second half which maybe had the pitch conditions underfoot been a little better, they might have extended their lead, but, we're asking these players to run through swamps, so what more can you expect?
Can I was just going to say, can I just say one very last thing about this is my Football Australia gripe, and I was actually thinking about this because I was looking through my highlights yesterday. So, Auckland have got another derby against Wellington next week, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they just play a
Yeah,
derby
I said
about
that earlier.
3 weeks
But
ago?
I did a rant over the fixturing the other week as well, remember?
Yeah,
With your 7 home
yeah,
games in a row to come.
yeah. What the fuck? Like they just I was that was my biggest takeaway about the game. Not the conditions, not Newcastle winning despite not keeping a clean sheet all season. Apparently, the fixturing. Like you played a New Zealand derby 3 or 4 weeks ago, and now you've got another one.
Look,
What the fuck?
last season we played Wanderers 3 times before we played you guys even once. I
Mm,
mean, the fixturing has always been a joke in this league, and I don't think that's ever going to change. I mean, we just said you guys have 7 home games in a row coming up. I mean, what's
yeah.
more ridiculous than that? I mean, you're not even playing a home and away season at that point, are you?
No,
I mean,
no.
you're just basically playing all your games at home.
Correct. Yeah, just it's a very weird quirk of the fixture, and one I think they need to fix next season. Um, you know, but anyway, I mean, it obviously means for you guys, stay top for another week,
Yeah.
and the Black Knights look forward to another derby, of which there'll probably be another one in about 4 more weeks after this. So,
Or 3
um,
days after, maybe even, who knows?
yeah, but I mean, but for the just to sort of before we move on to the last game, and it does involve the team we're about to talk about, the Jets losing to Perth last week, a really good result for them to bounce back, and that sort of ties in nicely to the final game of the round
Yeah, which
and of our review. It was Macarthur versus Perth.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought Perth were starting to turn the corner under Adam Griffiths. They were impressive last
Mm,
week against the Jets. They were even
yeah,
more impressive against MacArthur, who I've noticed is starting to struggle with those demands of Asian football, it seems. Because they were flat against us off the back of a week of Asian football, and they've done it again against Perth. Um, Perth, just in general, this 4-man attack looks like a level above for them now compared to what they've had in recent seasons. Adam Taggart looks like he's really starting to like enjoy playing with players who, you know, no disrespect to the strikers he's been around in recent seasons, but you know, it looks like a level above. Kaczarski, obviously being a Sydney fan, I know what he brings. Despotovsky is a young player who I've been impressed with, especially in this game. I thought he was very good. And the man of the match, from my opinion, Tom Lawrence. Goal against Jets last week, assist against MacArthur this week, and an all-round fantastic performance from the Welshman. Um, just a really, really good, solid win for Perth. I remember messaging you at half time telling you this game's going as expected so far because it was goalless at half time and not much had really happened in the first half. But in the second half,
yeah,
Perth really kind
yeah.
of started to dominant control on the match. And, you know, Tom Lawrence, I said, got the assist. It was Nick Pennington who scored in back-to-back weeks to open the scoring.
Mm,
And then later on, a really good finish for Shamoon to grab his first A-League goal from the edge of the box. And through most of the match, Perth relatively comfortable. MacArthur, you know, they're not creating much in a lot of these games. Harry Sawyer had another game where I thought he looks physical, he looks kind of imposing, but aside from that, he's not really getting involved in the play much apart from chasing after scraps and stuff like that. One thing I do want to bring at this is, I don't know how what your thoughts are on commentary in this league, but for a few seasons or a few years now, I've really had an issue with Phil Moss as a commentator. Um, and I don't understand how he's a football commentator or a football expert, even call him what, a former manager, even a man. I know there was shit under him, right? It says a lot. Um, he was a good assistant to Arnie, but that's about it. Um, I don't understand where his brain's at sometimes when he does commentary. Talking in the game like Anthony Caceres has been one of the best players this season is just mental. And the fact that he got in, like, look, I know he's literally moved from Sydney, and I'm not trying to say a bad word about him. And he got in the third place for the man of the match votes in this game as well. And I was just watching, I've seen him a few games of Macarthur this season, and I'm just watching going like, how on earth, like, what? He wasn't good in this game. He barely got on the ball, and when he did, he could barely create anything. I mean, what? Like, firstly, is Phil Moss on drugs? Because the amount of times I've heard him in commentary make the most ridiculously obscene takes in games on players and
yeah,
stuff like that is just ridiculous as to
yeah,
how this guy has a job as a
yeah,
commentator.
yeah.
Also, I want to
And
say, I don't know
yeah,
if you've heard his commentary. He's a co-commentator, obviously, but he might be one of the most boring co-commentators in the history of football. Like,
yeah.
genuinely. He makes the most boring takes. He talks about the game in the most boring way. He is that dull, basically.
And just
But
on a
I
side
will
note
say,
for
look,
league,
great win for Perth. MacArthur flat again after a week of Asian football. Clearly, that's going to be an issue for them this season. Do they kind of just maybe accept that they're not going to win an awful lot of games this season if they do well as long as they try and do well in Asia, which like you guys have been doing so to this point. And
yeah,
like we did last season, but yeah, like us last season, our league form took a hit greatly in the second half of the season. Um, so, but yeah, I think Perth have a good attack building and something building under Adam Griffiths. There was talk in the game over what's going to happen, whether he gets the interim post until the end of the season or if they start looking for a new manager right now. In my honest opinion, the way they played in the last two games, I don't think it would be the worst idea to give him the next game and see how they go in that and then base the decision off that. And if they win and play well
completely
or play
agree.
well again, give
Yeah,
him till the end of the season, right? Because
yeah,
it's been a long time since they've won back-to-back games. I think it was January. I think it was sometime in 2021 the last time they won back-to-back away games in the A-League or something like that. Or
yeah.
even back-to-back games. I can't remember. They've had a few torrid years, of course, at Perth Glory, and
Hmm.
like with Brisbane, our prediction right now of saying they're going to finish last, no doubt, is starting to
Yeah,
look a bit silly because they've started to move themselves up the table at the
yeah.
expense of Melbourne Victory.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say we talked about it off air. One of those, two of those predictions have not worked out so far, but one of them has surpassed our expectations in the best possible way. And yes, I am talking about victory. But the one thing I will say, Chester, on that film, Moss, if you are watching, mate, please like and
Oh my
subscribe.
god.
If you, you know, but look, onto victory. Look, I couldn't be happier with that result for Perth because I think, as you said, I think giving Adam Griffiths the job on a permanent
I'd
basis
say not yet. I'd
at
say
the
give him the
moment,
next game.
well,
Depending how they
I
do in
just,
the next game, yeah.
yeah, semi-permanent basis, you couldn't probably go too far than to give him that because I think he's deserved it. But they've got what is it, three home games now to come, and they haven't won at home for a while, from my memory. Certainly not this year. That's going to be the big test. Yes, they've done really well to win back-to-back away games. Can they bring that on their home deck at HBF Park as well? That's the big test. But as a victory, well, you and I both know my thoughts on them. Um, you know,
You
I'm
know,
pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked with that result. Because it means that
they're bottom. Yeah.
exactly, and that's pretty much all I've got to say. Really, they're bottom, and
I know
I'm
you
pretty
got
happy
one more
about
thing to
that.
say. You probably want to say don't sack Arthur Dillers
Well,
because
um,
they could get another manager in and get good again. So
yeah. Well, I mean, they could probably get, yeah, Bo. What's the Mice manager's name?
I thought you were about to say Bo
Bo
Webber
Hendrickson.
for some reason because I was thinking
Bo
Victoria. I thought you were
Webster.
about to say Bo Webster.
Well, Bo Hendrickson could be looking for a new job pretty soon. So if he's but look, I
Bless
think
him.
bless him maybe, but um, it really sort of
Does
while you want to
Jose
give
does Jose fancy a trip down to Australia?
while it really sort of sums up Victoria's season to now. It really highlights the positivity of both Glory and Brisbane Roar as well this weekend.
Yeah.
In that they've proven us wrong, both of us wrong, in our predictions, and for the better as well. I think it's good for the competition to have those two
Yeah, a
teams
bit of a
really in
change,
good
yeah, because
form.
there's been a few
Yeah,
seasons where they've been down in those doldrums, so it would make a change
absolutely,
for them to
absolutely.
be up in the
Yeah,
conversation again this season.
definitely.
But yeah, so yeah,
Yeah,
that was a bit of a longer one this week, guys. Apologies for that. I just had to go on that VAR rant just because, I mean, for those of you who've witnessed it, you would agree with me. So yeah, bit of a longer one compared to our recent week's one, but anyway, hope you enjoyed nonetheless another riveting review of Bundesliga and A-League action over the week from us. The schedule's going to get a bit hectic in the coming weeks, but considering we've gone past the hour and a half mark, we'll save that rundown for Thursday's episode of the tea break instead. So just stay tuned for that one, guys, where we will probably spend a bit of it explaining how we're going to kind of do things over the hectic Christmas period and whatnot to come. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of our Bundesliga and A-League review. Some big results, of course, in both games. Sydney stayed top despite losing. courtesy of our results. Bayern open up an 8-point lead. Pauli lose a ninth in a row. Mainz hit the bottom of the table. Victory hit the bottom of the table. I'm just summarising now. Yeah, so I hope you guys.
City played on the
Yeah,
weekend in a game apparently that
yeah,
wasn't really anything worth talking about.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, hope you
had
guys.
everything.
Hope you guys enjoyed another week of our review, and we'll see you back on Thursday for the next episode of the Tea Break. So yeah, peace out, take care, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Take care, guys.